Welcome back to Reddit Affair Diaries. How's your day going so far? I hope it's been great, but if not, don't stress. You're in the perfect spot to relax and dive into some juicy relationship stories. There's always something new and unexpected waiting around the corner here. Before we jump in, leave a comment and share something good from your day. Let's keep the good vibes going and start this story together.
This Reddit story from the r/relationship advice subreddit describes how the OP's father-in-law wrongly accused her of cheating on her husband.
I never imagined my life would take this kind of turn. I mean, when I married Jake, I thought I was building a future with a man who loved me, who trusted me. But here I am, standing in the ruins of a relationship, all because of lies, vicious, baseless lies that have torn us apart. It didn't happen overnight. It was more like a slow burn, something I hadn't even noticed until it was too late to put out the fire. Jake and his dad have always been close, best friends even. They work together, hang out together, and share nearly everything. In the early days of our marriage, I thought that was a good thing. I wanted Jake to have that bond, and I did everything I could to make sure his dad and I got along. But despite my efforts, it was clear from the beginning that his father, Mark, never liked me. At first, it was subtle. Maybe I convinced myself that I was imagining it. He'd be polite enough when Jake was around, never outright mean. But his jokes, those little comments that always seemed to hit too close to home, never sat right with me. He'd say things like, "You really lucked out with Jake, huh? A girl from your background would never dream of a house like this," or "Not bad for a poor girl." Always delivered with a smile, but with an edge that cut deep. I grew up in a modest home, and sure, we didn't have a lot of money, but I loved my family, and we made do. Those comments chipped away at me. Still, I didn't say much about it to Jake at first. I didn't want to cause problems. But things got worse after Jake and I moved out of his father's house and into our own. It felt like a new beginning for us, a chance to start our life together in a home that was truly ours. And yet, it was like his dad resented me for it. The nice facade he'd put on for Jake's sake began to slip more often, especially when Jake wasn't around. I remember the first time I confronted Jake about it. We were sitting on the couch, and I just blurted it out, how his dad made me feel small, how he constantly insinuated that I was only with Jake for money. Jake had brushed it off, telling me not to take it personally. "That's just how he is," he said. "He doesn't mean anything by it." But the thing is, words like that, said over and over, start to feel like they're true. No matter how much you try to ignore them. Over time, I started to wonder if Jake even noticed how his father treated me. Maybe it was easier for him not to. I told myself I could deal with it, that as long as Jake and I were happy, Mark's opinion didn't matter. But it's hard to keep convincing yourself of that when every interaction with your father-in-law leaves you feeling like you'll never be enough. Things took a darker turn when Mark started dropping strange, cryptic comments. He'd say things like, "You should leave Jake while you still have a chance," or "One day, I might just have to tell Jake the truth." His eyes would flash with something sinister when he said those words, but I never fully understood what he meant. What truth? I hadn't done anything wrong, so what was there to tell? I tried not to let it bother me, but those words hung in the air, festering in the back of my mind. I even asked Jake about it once. I told him straight up, "What if your dad started spreading lies about me? What would you do?" He'd looked at me, surprised, and laughed it off. "My dad would never do that," he'd said, completely confident in his belief. I wanted to believe him, but something about the way Mark acted kept gnawing at me. And then it happened. I wasn't there when it all went down, but the fallout was immediate. Mark had told Jake that he'd seen me with another man. Not just once, but multiple times. He said I'd been spotted around town with some guy, and worse, that we'd been seen checking into a hotel together. He even claimed we'd kissed in public. Every vile, disgusting detail rolled off his tongue, and Jake listened. My heart felt like it had stopped when Jake came home that day, his face pale and eyes distant. I defended myself immediately. I told Jake it was a lie, that none of it was true. But I could see it in his eyes, the doubt. It was like a wedge had been driven between us, and Mark's lies were splitting it wider and wider with every second. I asked Jake if his dad had any proof, if there were any pictures or witnesses. He shook his head, but the damage had been done. The seed of doubt had been planted. My words weren't enough to pull it out by the root. That night, Jake told me he needed space, needed time to clear his head. And where did he go? Straight to his dad's house. The place where all this started, where the lies had been spun. I remember standing there in the doorway, watching him leave, my chest tight with a pain I couldn't describe. It wasn't just the feeling of being accused of something I hadn't done, it was the realization that Jake didn't believe me. After everything we'd been through together, he still doubted me. And he was walking right into the arms of the person who had torn us apart. I spent the next few days in a haze, going over everything in my head. How could this happen? Why would Mark go so far as to try and destroy my marriage? What had I ever done to him? I kept replaying moments in my mind, trying to find where things had gone wrong, but there was no answer that made sense. Jake barely called. When he did, he was distant, cold. I could feel him slipping further away from me. Each hour that passed made me more certain that Mark was filling his head with more lies, poisoning whatever was left of our relationship. I cried, more than I ever had in my life. The betrayal cut so deep, not just because of the lies, but because Jake had allowed himself to be manipulated. He'd promised to stand by me, to trust me. But now, it felt like I was losing him, like I was losing everything. In my heart, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I had been faithful. I had loved Jake with everything I had. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. I was being punished for something I hadn't done, and no amount of pleading or reasoning seemed to make a difference. The longer Jake stayed at his dad's, the worse it became. I imagined them sitting together, Mark twisting the knife deeper, convincing Jake that I was some kind of monster, a cheater. I could feel the walls closing in, suffocating me with the weight of it all. Every part of me wanted to fight for my marriage, to pull Jake back to me, but I didn't know how. I didn't know if he even wanted to hear my side anymore. I found myself standing in front of our wedding picture one night, tears streaming down my face. We had been so happy. I had felt so safe in his arms, so sure of our future together. How had we ended up here, on opposite sides of this lie? I thought about calling him, but my hands shook too much to dial the number. Would he even pick up? And if he did, what would I say? Would he even believe me anymore, or had his father's lies become his truth? The unfairness of it all crashed over me in waves. I had never wanted to be in this position, having to defend myself against something that wasn't real, something I hadn't done. But here I was, my life unraveling because of someone else's twisted agenda. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Jake would ever come home. Wondering if we'd ever find our way back to each other. Or if Mark had succeeded in breaking us apart for good.
Relevant comments by Reddit users. You should confront him and record it either with video or audio. Since he only does this when your husband isn't around, that would be the perfect chance to catch him in his lies. Maybe even try recording a phone call. Just make sure it's legal where you live. Response by OP. I did call him as soon as my husband told me because I was desperate to get some proof that he's lying. But he didn't say anything that would incriminate him. Instead, he just kept saying things like, "I can't believe you'd do this to him," as if he truly believes I cheated. I can't tell if he knew I was trying to record him or if he's just completely out of his mind. OP on her husband believing his father without any proof. I just don't understand how it's this easy for him to believe his dad over me, especially when there's no proof. An affair is something you can easily prove, right? If I was cheating and seen around town with another guy, where's the evidence? Why can't they prove it? I asked my husband for that proof, but he kept saying it didn't matter because he trusts his dad. He said the only reason his dad doesn't have any proof is that he never had time to take a picture of me with this supposed guy. It's literally just his word against mine, and yet, he's choosing to believe his dad. I'm honestly thinking of giving up. This feels so unfair. I've never cheated, never done anything wrong, and yet I'm being accused like this. If my husband can so easily see me as this awful person without even asking for proof, then maybe he never really trusted me. He doesn't see how manipulative his dad is, and I've been trying to tell him for so long. Maybe it's just not worth it anymore. OP on her father-in-law and why he dislikes her. His dad thinks I'm only with him for the money, and I honestly have no idea why. Right now, I'm seriously thinking about leaving and starting over on my own. I don't need the car or the house. I'm here because I love Jake. But if he doesn't love me enough to at least ask for proof before accusing me of something so horrible, then what's the point? I'd rather be on my own than keep dealing with this. If his dad is willing to go this far, I don't even want to imagine what he'll do next. Okay, on finding a way to prove the truth. You just reminded me that we have Ring cameras. Now, I just need to figure out the days and times I was supposedly cheating at a hotel, because there's a good chance I was at home. Maybe I can use the Ring footage to prove it. Thank you so much for reminding me.